Every house, every king, and every battle has its own truth. But there are stories older than crowns, darker than the night, and more dangerous than any blade. They were never written in books. They were whispered to fire, to the trees, and to the dead gods. And today, we dare to uncover one of them. In the long shadow of the Iron Throne, when dragons were only memories and the seven kingdoms trembled at whispers of rebellion, there was once a boy named Aerys of House Targaryen. His hair shone like molten silver, and his eyes burned with the violet fire of old Valyria. He was born to rule, or so the court whispered, for the blood of dragons flowed in his veins, and the songs of his ancestors still echoed through the Red Keep's halls. When King Jaehaerys II died, the crown passed to his young son, and with it came the heavy weight of destiny. Aerys was barely more than a man, handsome and bright, his smile quick to charm, and his laughter full of promise. To the lords of Westeros, he seemed a new dawn after years of slow decay. Aerys the Beautiful, some called him then, for he shone in silks and jewels, radiant as the dragon lords of old. Beside him stood his childhood companion, Tywin Lannister, Lord of Casterly Rock. Cold, brilliant, and unflinching, Tywin was everything Aerys admired and feared, a man who bent others to his will without the glimmer of a crown. They had grown up together at court, two golden youths destined for greatness. When Aerys took the throne, he made Tywin his hand, saying before all, "The king and his hand shall rule as one." And so they did. In those first years, the realm prospered. Tywin's firm hand and Aerys's glittering charm made a perfect pair. New roads were built, debts repaid, and peace held the seven kingdoms in its tender grasp. The small folk toasted their young king, calling him Aerys the Wise. But peace, like summer, never lasts forever. Even in those golden days, shadows stirred. Aerys's pride, so easily fed, began to hunger for more. He envied the respect Tywin commanded, how the lords bowed lower to the hand than to the king himself. Tywin's banners gleamed brighter, his feasts were grander, his judgments swifter, and though Tywin swore every act was done for the crown, Aerys began to hear other voices, whispering courtiers, flatterers, parasites who sensed weakness in the king's heart. "They speak more of Tywin's justice than your own," they hissed. "It is said the lion sits higher than the dragon." Aerys laughed them off at first. Tywin was his friend, his brother in all but blood, but the seeds of doubt had been sown, and in the dark of night they took root. Then came Lady Joanna, Tywin's wife, fair and wise, with a smile that could soften even Aerys's mood. Some said the king had admired her too openly when she served as lady-in-waiting to Queen Rhaella. Others whispered that the laughter between them had once been too warm, too personal. When Joanna gave birth to twins, golden-haired and perfect, Aerys sent a raven of congratulations. But when she bore her last child, a twisted boy born small and misshapen, the king made a jest so cruel that even the courtiers blanched. "The gods have punished you," he said to Tywin, laughing before the whole court, "for thinking yourself their equal." The friendship shattered. From that day, Tywin's smile became as hard as stone. He continued his duty, but there was no warmth between them anymore. The court began to fracture, some clinging to Tywin's order, others to Aerys's charm. Queen Rhaella watched in silence, her heart breaking as her husband grew colder, and her son, Prince Rhaegar, grew distant. Rhaegar was thoughtful, quiet, a boy who preferred the harp to the sword. "He will be the one to heal the realm," Rhaella whispered to her maids. "Not his father." But Aerys wanted no healer. He wanted fire. He began to speak of dragons again, of waking them from stone. He filled the cellars of the Red Keep with wildfire, for protection, he said. He spent long hours alone, staring into flames as if they spoke to him. And always, the whispers followed. He dreams of dragons. He fears Tywin. He grows stranger by the moon. Yet none dared confront the king, for he was still Aerys the Beautiful, the dragon in silk, and when he smiled, the realm still hoped. Then one winter's morning, news came that changed everything. Lord Darklyn of Duskendale had refused to pay his taxes and demanded a new charter from the crown. Tywin counseled caution. "Send your envoys, your grace. There is no need to ride yourself." But Aerys's pride flared. "I am the king," he said, rising from the Iron Throne. "And the king does not hide behind others' swords." Against all advice, he rode to Duskendale with a small escort. What happened next would break the man, and with him, the realm. For in the dark streets of that small town, surrounded by treachery and smoke, the Mad King was born. And though no one knew it yet, the flames that would consume the Targaryen dynasty had already been lit. The dawn that followed Aerys's ride to Duskendale would be remembered as the day hope began to fade from the realm. The king, defying every counsel, entered the gates of that proud and restless town with only a few guards beside him. The people of Duskendale had grown rich on trade and proud on gold, but they were tired of being ruled from afar. When Aerys rode through their streets in gleaming armor, they did not cheer. They watched in silence. At first, all seemed well. The Lord of Duskendale, Dennis Darklyn, came forth with honeyed words, kneeling before his sovereign and offering a feast in his honor. But behind his smiles, rebellion festered. For when Aerys entered the castle of Duskendale, the gates closed behind him. Steel clanged, swords were drawn. The king's own guards were cut down before his eyes. Dennis Darklyn stepped forward, no longer kneeling. "Forgive me, your grace," he said, his voice shaking, though his hand did not. "But I cannot bend the knee to a tyrant who would bleed us dry." Aerys's fury blazed like wildfire. "You dare raise hand against your king?" he thundered. "You will burn for this treason, all of you." But his threats fell on deaf ears. They dragged him down into the dark beneath the castle, into a cell where no light touched the walls. The Iron Throne was left empty, and for 6 long months Westeros trembled. Tywin Lannister's wrath was terrible to behold. He surrounded Duskendale with his armies, vowing to tear down its stones one by one. "The king will be avenged," he swore, "even if the whole town must die for it." Yet Lord Darklyn threatened to kill Aerys if an assault began, and for the first time, Tywin found himself powerless. Within those blackened walls, Aerys Targaryen's mind began to twist. At first, he raged, calling for fire and blood, for dragons and justice. But as the days turned into weeks, his fury curdled into fear. Rats became his only companions. The damp walls whispered his name, mocking him. He saw shadows where there were none, heard the scrape of claws that were only his own heartbeat. He dreamed of his ancestors, the great dragon lords of Valyria, and in their dreams, they told him secrets. "Fire is truth," they whispered. "Only through flame can the world be made pure again." When at last Sir Barristan Selmy crept through the sewers and pulled the king from that darkness, Aerys came forth a changed man. The handsome monarch who had once charmed the court returned to King's Landing, hollow-eyed, gaunt, his silver hair wild and uncombed. He spoke little, and when he did, his words burned with venom. "The traitors surround us," he told his council. "They are everywhere. even here, in my own hall." The court rejoiced at his return, but their joy was short-lived. Aerys began to see treachery in every corner. Lord Darklyn and his family were burned alive by his command, their screams echoing over the city walls. The ashes of their house blew across the bay, carried by the wind as a warning. Tywin said nothing. Though his face was stone, he continued his duties, restoring order, paying debts, keeping peace. But the king trusted him no longer. "He grows too powerful," Aerys muttered. "He sits on gold enough to buy the throne itself." And so the seeds of their final enmity took root. Aerys locked himself away in the Red Keep, surrounded by alchemists and whispers. He ordered wildfire brewed in secret, for the defense of the realm, though all knew it was his new obsession. He dismissed his wise counselors and filled their seats with flatterers and fools. Even Queen Rhaella was not spared his suspicion. He accused her of betrayal, of sorcery, of infidelity. Guards were set outside her chambers, and the queen's laughter, once soft and bright, was heard no more. Prince Rhaegar, growing tall and solemn, watched his father's descent in silence. He spent his days in the library or beneath the heart tree in the Godswood, reading the tales of heroes and the prophecies of the prince who was promised. "The dragon has 3 heads," he murmured often, though few understood what he meant. At court, the courtiers whispered behind their hands. Some still called Aerys the Resurrected, the man who had returned from darkness, but most called him something else, only when no ears could hear. The Mad King. Then came the day of Tywin Lannister's greatest insult. The Hand, faithful through all, sought to strengthen his bond to the throne by offering his daughter Cersei as bride to Prince Rhaegar. But when the offer reached the king's ears, Aerys burst into laughter. Harsh, cold laughter that echoed through the hall. "Rhaegar," he said, "shall not marry the daughter of my servant." The word struck like a dagger. Tywin rose, bowed stiffly, and returned to Casterly Rock. From that hour, the king and his Hand were enemies in all but name. Years passed, each darker than the last. The fires in the city's vaults grew. The people whispered of strange lights flickering beneath the Red Keep at night, and Aerys, trapped within his own fears, saw enemies multiplying like shadows in firelight. When reports came of unrest in the Stormlands and whispers of rebellion in the north, Aerys saw the proof he had long awaited. "They rise against me," he hissed. "They will burn." He turned to his pyromancers, mad-eyed men who bowed before him as if he were a god. "Make ready the wildfire," he told them. "The flames will cleanse the realm." Thus began the final madness, though few yet knew it. For in the heart of the Red Keep, beneath the very throne of swords, the king's alchemists labored night and day, brewing death for a city that still slept in ignorance. And in his dreams, Aerys saw dragons flying once more over the capital, their fire raining down upon all who defied him. He woke smiling. "Soon," he whispered to the empty chamber, "soon they will see. The dragon still lives." But far away, a storm was rising. A song of rebellion was beginning, a song that would end in blood and fire. And in that storm's first whisper, the world began to turn against the last Dragon King. The years that followed the sundering of the friendship between King Aerys and Tywin Lannister were years of slow decay, though few dared name it so aloud. The court glittered still with silks and feasts, but beneath the gold ran veins of fear. Servants whispered of screams echoing from the lower halls of the Red Keep, and of the king's growing fascination with fire. Aerys no longer rode among his people. He no longer smiled for the court or opened the great gates of the keep to petitioners. He stayed within, pacing the long corridors like a ghost of his own making. The Iron Throne, forged in the heat of dragon flame, had become both his seat and his torment. He would sit there for hours, muttering to himself, his hands twitching as if the blades were whispering secrets only he could hear. At his side stood Grand Maester Pycelle, obsequious and false, forever bending to whatever wind blew strongest. Nearer still were the pyromancers, those pale-eyed alchemists of the Guild of Alchemists, who spoke softly of the divine nature of fire. They told Eris that dragons were not truly gone, that their spirit lingered within the green flames of wildfire. And the king, desperate to believe himself chosen, listened. "Fire is the purest of all elements," he would say. "It consumes lies. It reveals truth. In fire there is only cleansing." The more the king burned, the colder his queen became. Queen Rhaella had once been proud, but the years of fear and humiliation drained her spirit. She bore child after child, each taken by the stranger before their first breath, until her heart was nothing but ash. Only Rhaegar survived, slender and solemn, the lonely prince whose eyes seemed always fixed on distant storms. When Rhaegar came of age, the court found hope again. The young prince was handsome and noble, a true Targaryen of the old blood. He spoke softly, played the harp, and treated high and lowborn alike with grace. The people began to whisper that perhaps he, not Eris, was the dragon to come. But such words, once carried to the king's ear, were like oil upon the fire. "They would crown my son in my place," Eris hissed. "My own blood conspires against me." He forbade Rhaegar to leave the city for a time, setting spies upon him. Yet Rhaegar endured, neither rebelling nor bending. In the still hours of night, he walked the God's Wood, reading old prophecies beneath the heart tree's pale leaves. The servant said he sought the meaning of a single riddle, the song of ice and fire. It was around this time that Eris began to see plots everywhere. Lords who hesitated to bow deeply enough were branded traitors. Men who spoke too plainly vanished. The fires beneath the Red Keep grew. Barrels of wildfire were moved through the city under cover of darkness. "Should they come for me?" Eris told his pyromancers. "We shall see whose flames burn hotter." Then came a feast unlike any before it, the great tournament at Harrenhal. Rhaegar himself called for it, seeking to unite the realm and heal its wounds. The lords of every house came, save Tywin, who remained in his rock. The people came by the thousands, filling the fields with tents of every color. For a time, the Seven Kingdoms seemed to breathe again. But even in festival, the shadow of the Mad King stretched long. When Eris arrived, uninvited yet unavoidable, the crowd fell silent. Gone was the golden monarch of youth. Before them rode a thin, wild-eyed figure with a beard untrimmed and nails like claws. The air itself seemed to shrink away from him. He sat upon the dais in armor black as night, his hands trembling. When lords approached, he searched their faces as if reading betrayal in every smile. "Traitors," he whispered, though none dared answer. And there, before all the realm, Rhaegar Targaryen, crowned Prince of Dragonstone, won the lists. His final charge broke Sir Barristan's lance in two. As the trumpet sounded and the people cried his name, Rhaegar rode past his father's dark gaze to where Lyanna Stark stood among her kin. He laid a garland of winter roses in her lap. It was a gesture small as a breath, yet it changed everything. Whispers spread faster than wildfire. The prince had passed over his lawful wife, Elia of Dorne, for the northern girl. He crowned her queen of love and beauty, the Lord said, before the eyes of gods and men. Aerys saw only insult and rebellion. "My son plots to steal my throne," he snarled that night. "He would make bastards of my line." The seeds of the Great War were sown in that moment, though few yet knew it. Not long after, word came that Rhaegar and Lyanna had vanished. Some said he had taken her by force. Others whispered that she went willingly. The truth mattered little. Her brother, Brandon Stark, rode to King's Landing in fury, demanding the prince's head. Aerys received him in the throne room. "Bring me Rhaegar!" Brandon shouted, his voice echoing off the steel walls. "Or we will come for him, and for you." The court fell silent. Aerys smiled, a terrible smile, thin and gleaming. "You shall have your answer," he said. "Bring me his father." And so Rickard Stark, Lord of Winterfell, came south to answer the summons. But it was not a parley Aerys had planned. He had traps laid, torches ready. The court gathered to witness, though many wished they had not. Rickard Stark was bound in his armor, suspended above a roaring fire. His son Brandon was strangled slowly before his eyes, a noose tightening as he fought to reach his dying father. Aerys watched, laughing, while the smell of burning steel filled the hall. When it was done, the king rose and turned to his guards. "Send word to every lord," he commanded. "Send me their sons and their daughters as hostages, that I may know who is loyal. And summon my pyromancers. We must prepare. The realm is full of traitors." That day, the last shreds of loyalty burned away. The North called its banners. Robert Baratheon, fostered at the Eyrie, raised his hammer and swore vengeance. Jon Arryn defied the king's demand for Eddard Stark's head. The rebellion had begun. In the Red Keep, Aerys stood by the window, watching the city below. "Let them come," he murmured. "Let them come and burn." He looked upon the skyline, upon the septs and houses, and saw not his people, but kindling. The wildfire beneath the streets waited, patient as fate. And the Mad King dreamed of dragons, and of a city cleansed in flame. The drums of war rolled across the seven kingdoms. Word of the Stark deaths flew north and south on the wings of ravens. And with each passing day, more banners rose in defiance of the Iron Throne. From the Stormlands came Robert Baratheon, great and fierce, his warhammer in hand. From the Vale rode Jon Arryn and young Eddard Stark, their hearts bound by grief and vengeance. The River Lords joined them soon after, led by Hoster Tully, whose daughter's fates would soon be tied to the rebellion. The realm that had known peace in the early years of Aerys's reign now seethed with fire and blood. Yet in the Red Keep, the king's madness deepened, feeding upon itself like wildfire consuming air. He would pace his hall in the night, muttering of dragons and betrayal, of sons who turned against fathers and friends who plotted in silence. The city grew fearful. The people whispered of strange lights flickering beneath the keep, of screams in the black hours before dawn. Ser Jaime Lannister, golden and young, had been named to the Kingsguard not long before, an honor forced upon Tywin's son by Aerys himself, meant as both mockery and punishment. It bound Jaime to the king's service and forbade his father's rebellion. Yet even within white armor, Jaime saw the rot beneath the crown. He had once admired Aerys, as all had in youth, but now the man before him was a ruin of flesh and fear. One night, the king summoned him to the throne room. Aerys sat upon the Iron Throne, his eyes wild, his fingers bleeding where the blades had cut him. "You are your father's son," he said. "You smile as he smiles, and you think I do not see it. But I do. All lions are the same." Jaime knelt, saying nothing. "Tell me, sir," Aerys whispered, leaning forward. "Do you know what happens to lions when the fire grows too hot? Their fur catches, their flesh melts, and all that remains is ash." He laughed then, a sound that scraped the walls. "Perhaps your father will learn that soon enough." When Tywin Lannister received word of the murders of Rickard and Brandon Stark, he closed his gates and waited. No raven of defiance came from Casterly Rock, but none of loyalty either. "Let the stag and wolf tear each other to pieces," he said coldly. "When the time comes, the lion will feast." And so the rebellion raged without him. At the Trident, Robert Baratheon struck victory after victory, his hammer red with the blood of loyalists. The Crown's armies faltered, though Prince Rhaegar, absent for long months, had at last returned. He rode before his men in shining armor, rubies upon his breastplate, his face calm as dawn. To those who saw him, he seemed a king already, the last hope of the dragon's line. But the Mad King saw treason even in that hope. "He means to take my throne," Aerys whispered to his council. "He has the people's love and the Lord's loyalty. I see it in their eyes. They think him savior. They think me mad." The pyromancers bowed low before him. "Let them think what they will, your grace. Fire does not ask permission to burn." And so he gave them leave to craft more wildfire. In secret chambers beneath the city, they worked without rest, filling the catacombs and tunnels with their green death. Hundreds of jars became thousands, hidden beneath the Great Sept, beneath the guild halls, beneath the homes of innocents. "If they come for me," Aerys told his men, "we shall leave them nothing to claim." Then came the fateful summons from the front. Rhaegar wished for his father to send new orders. Aerys sent only one. "Kill them all," he commanded. "Every rebel, every friend of traitors. Let their kin taste the dragon's wrath." But the tide of war could not be turned by madness. At the ford of the Trident, the armies met at last, Robert's banners of the crowned stag against Rhaegar's three-headed dragon. The river ran red that day. Songs would later call it a duel of destiny, the hammer against the rubies. When it ended, the prince's breastplate lay shattered, and his rubies scattered like blood upon the current. The rebellion had won. News of Rhaegar's death struck Aerys like a blade to the heart. He wept, then raved, then laughed as though the world itself were a jest. "He betrayed me," he screamed to those who remained. "He sought to take what was mine, and now the gods have punished him. The line is pure again. The dragon remains one." But the dragon was broken, and the lords knew it. The Tyrells and Redwinds bent the knee to Robert. The Martells cursed the throne for the death of Elia and her children. Only the capital remained loyal, its gates barred, and its ruler half-mad with fear. When the news reached Casterly Rock that Robert Baratheon had taken the field, Tywin at last moved. He gathered his banners, not for open war, but for pretense. "We ride to save the city," he told his men, "to serve our king in his hour of need." Aerys received word of Tywin's approach with trembling joy. "He comes at last," he said. "My true hand, my oldest friend, he will bring me their heads." Ser Jaime, standing at the foot of the throne, said nothing. The bells rang as the gates of King's Landing opened. The Lannisters entered the city, their armor gleaming in the afternoon sun. But no sooner had they passed the walls than the killing began. The lion's banner rose above the towers, and the streets ran red. When word reached the Red Keep, Aerys's laughter died. "He has betrayed me," he whispered, "as all have, as all will." He turned to his pyromancer, a thin man whose hands trembled as he clutched the king's final command. "Burn them," Aerys said. "Burn them all. Let the city be my tomb. If I cannot rule them, let no man have them." The pyromancer fled to obey. But one man stood between fire and ruin, the youngest of the Kingsguard, sworn to protect his king until death. Jaime Lannister, the golden lion in white, climbed the steps toward the throne. "Your Grace," he said, his voice shaking, "the city is lost. We must surrender. Open the gates and spare your people." Aerys turned upon him, his face twisted in rage. "Spare them?" he hissed. "They would have seen me dragged through the streets. No, let them burn. Let them all burn." And as the king turned toward his pyromancer once more, Jaime's sword came free of its scabbard. Steel sang in the torchlight. The Mad King never finished his last command. When the doors burst open, the throne room was silent save for the crackle of flame. The king lay at the foot of the Iron Throne, his blood seeping into the steps. Jaime stood above him, sword in hand, his white cloak stained red. Outside, the smoke of burning houses rose into the sky, but the wildfire remained unlit. The city was spared, the dragon was dead. And with that single stroke, the age of the Targaryens ended, not in glory, but in madness and ash. The smoke that rose above King's Landing that day marked the ending of an age, the fall of the dragons, and the birth of a new and harsher realm. When the gates were thrown wide, the bodies of the slain littered the streets, and the Lannister banners hung crimson and gold above the towers of the Red Keep. The stench of death mingled with the sharp tang of wildfire that had never been set alight. Aerys Targaryen, last of his name to sit upon the Iron Throne, lay cold in his blood, and the songs of his lineage fell silent in a single, echoing heartbeat. Sir Jaime Lannister stood alone beside the corpse, his sword still warm in his hand. For a long time he did not move. The Iron Throne loomed over him, its jagged blades gleaming with firelight, and he thought of all the men who had cut themselves upon its edges, of his king's bleeding hands, of the madness that had dripped like blood from his tongue. He had slain the very man he was sworn to protect, and in that moment he understood that no oath could cleanse such a deed. The city was safe, but his honor lay buried with the dragon he had killed. When Lord Tywin entered the throne room, his golden armor spattered with soot, he looked upon the body of the king and upon his son. "So ends the madness," he said quietly, and for once there was no pride in his voice. He gazed upon the Iron Throne, and in its reflection saw his future, the power he had long been denied. But Tywin was no fool. He knew the realm would not accept a lion upon that seat, not while a Baratheon hammer still echoed on the fields beyond. The doors opened again, and through them strode Eddard Stark, grim and weary from war. He had come with Robert's army behind him to find the city already taken. He looked upon the dead king, and then upon Jaime, whose sword was still red. "What have you done?" Eddard asked, his voice low, heavy with disbelief. "What had to be done?" Jaime answered, his eyes hollow. "He would have burned us all." Eddard's face hardened. "You swore an oath." "I kept the realm," said Jaime. "Does that count for nothing?" But there was no forgiveness in the eyes of the wolf. Word spread quickly after that, of the Kingslayer who had murdered his lord, of the false saviors who had entered the city under a banner of peace and brought only death. The songs that might have praised him were never sung. Elsewhere, another tragedy unfolded. In the highest chamber of Maegor's holdfast, Queen Rhaella labored to bring forth her last child. She had fled from the king's madness to Dragonstone, her heart heavy with dread. Outside, the skies were black with storm, and thunder rolled like the voices of angry gods. The maesters and midwives whispered prayers, but Rhaella spoke none. She had lost too many babes already. When the storm broke, it seemed the very castle shook. Lightning split the sky as the child came screaming into the world, a girl with silver hair and violet eyes. "Daenerys," the queen whispered, holding her close. "Stormborn, of the blood of the dragon." That night, Rhaella Targaryen died, her strength spent. Only the infant and a handful of loyal men survived. Among them was Sir Willem Darry, who took the babe and her young brother Viserys across the narrow sea, away from the ashes of their house. The Targaryen line still lived, but it was broken, scattered like embers in the wind. Back in King's Landing, Robert Baratheon took the Iron Throne. He was a warrior of great strength, broad of shoulder, with laughter like thunder and a temper to match. The realm hailed him as savior, and the lords bent the knee to his crown. Yet, for all his victories, there was no joy in his eyes. When he looked upon the throne, he saw not triumph, but ghosts. He asked after Lyanna, the woman who had kindled his rebellion. None could give him comfort. She had been found dying in a bed of blood and roses, her last words whispered to Eddard Stark and never spoken again. The new king wept for her in secret, and the sound of it was like the breaking of a storm. The realm tried to heal. The Lannisters were rewarded, their debts repaid with titles and gold. The Starks returned north, grim and silent. The Baratheons ruled from the Iron Throne, but the shadow of the Mad King lingered over them all. The burned halls of the Red Keep were cleaned, the bodies buried, yet the smell of smoke never fully left its stones. Jaime remained in the King's Guard, bound now not by honor, but by the weight of what he had done. Men called him Kingslayer, whispered of his treachery, and turned their faces away. He bore it with cold defiance, yet every night he saw the same thing when he closed his eyes: the flash of steel, the spatter of blood, the fire that had never come. And so it was that the reign of dragons ended and the age of men began anew. Yet even as peace returned, the cracks in the realm's heart widened. The last Targaryens, adrift across the sea, dreamed of vengeance. The new king drank to forget. The lion smiled, patient as ever, and in the quiet of the throne room, where the torches burned low, the Iron Throne stood waiting, its jagged edges gleaming like fangs in the dark. It was said that when the wind rose through the hall, it whispered faintly of the past, of a king's laughter turned to madness, of a sun crowned in rubies, of a city that almost burned. And those who listened closely swore they could still hear his voice, distant and terrible, echoing from the stones. Burn them all. The pyromancers were scattered, but not destroyed. Some vanished into hiding, taking their secrets with them. Deep below the city, sealed behind walls and tunnels forgotten by men, the last jars of wildfire still slept, silent, green, waiting. For fire does not die easily. It only waits for breath to wake it. And though the Mad King was gone, the flames he kindled would one day burn again, through prophecy, through blood, through the dreams of dragons yet unborn. Thus ended the tale of Aerys II Targaryen, last of his line to rule from the Iron Throne. The poets would call him the Mad King, but in the ashes of history, some whispered that he had only seen too far, too clearly, that he had glimpsed the fire at the heart of the world and been consumed by it. Yet madness, whether born of fear or of vision, left only ruin behind, and the realm, scarred and trembling, could do nothing but carry on, its peace as fragile as glass, its future already turning in the winds of fate. The throne of swords sat silent, but the ghosts of those who had died for it lingered still. Years passed, yet the memory of the Mad King clung to the walls of the Red Keep like the scent of smoke that no washing could drive away. The reign of Robert Baratheon was meant to be a new beginning, a time of peace, strength, and laughter. But even peace can carry the taste of ashes. In the early days of his rule, King Robert walked the halls of the keep as if to test them, like a man trying on a crown that did not yet fit. He was not born to silk and ceremony. He was a creature of the battlefield, loud and full of life, more comfortable beneath open sky than beneath the weight of a ceiling built for dragons. He drank deep, fought harder, and filled the court with noise to drown the whispers that haunted it. The people cheered him, for he was everything Aerys was not: bold, fair, and mortal. Yet behind his laughter lay a sorrow he could never put to rest. Every night, he dreamed of a girl with the scent of winter roses in her hair, and every morning he awoke beside a queen he did not love. Cersei Lannister had come to him in the aftermath of war, her beauty bright as new-forged gold, her smile hiding the quiet fury of her house. To the realm, she was the symbol of peace, the union of stag and lion. But to Robert, she was a reminder of all he had lost. He had wanted Lyanna Stark, the wolf maid who had died in blood and silence, and no crown could fill the emptiness her absence left behind. The court changed under the new king. The songs of dragons were forbidden. Their banners were torn down or burned. The heads of stone dragons were broken from the Red Keep's walls, their eyes gouged out so that they might never watch again. Only the Iron Throne remained untouched, for even Robert dared not alter what Aegon the Conqueror had forged. He sat upon it uneasily, as if it might cut him, as it had cut Aerys before. And far away, across the narrow sea, the last embers of the dragon's blood lived on. In the free cities, the exiled Prince Viserys Targaryen wandered from court to court, a beggar in silks. The years had twisted him, once a frightened boy, now a man of bitterness and feverish pride. He called himself the True Dragon, but men laughed behind his back. He carried his father's madness in his eyes, though it burned colder, sharper, like the edge of glass. His sister Daenerys, the girl born in storm, grew up beneath his shadow. She knew little of Westeros beyond the stories Viserys told her. Tales of golden palaces stolen by usurpers, of treacherous lords, of a throne that was hers by right. He made her repeat those words until she could say them without thought. "We are the blood of the dragon." But Daenerys did not remember the Iron Throne, nor the Red Keep, nor the man her brother called father. Her memories were of salt air, cold nights, and fear. The fear that they would be discovered by the assassins Robert sent across the sea. In the dark hours, Viserys would whisper of vengeance, his hands trembling as he spoke of fire reborn. He promised her dragons, crowns, and the burning of their enemies. Yet Daenerys, quiet and watchful, could see the truth in his eyes. The dragon her brother claimed to be was only a man chasing ghosts. Back in Westeros, Robert's realm began to settle into uneasy calm. The wars were done, the banners furled, but peace did not breed joy. The king grew restless, his laughter turning to anger when courtiers whispered of debts and duties. The wine flowed freely, and his belly thickened with years of feasting. Tywin Lannister returned to Casterly Rock, ruled in quiet power, his daughter's children growing in the royal nursery. The queen's twin brother Jaime remained with the king's guard, his white cloak clean though his name was stained forever. The songs called him Oathbreaker, Kingslayer, Liar, and yet none dared face him with sword in hand. In the north, Eddard Stark ruled Winterfell with the stern honor of his house. His memories of that bloody day in the throne room never faded. The dead king, the boy in white armor, the stench of blood and betrayal. When he knelt before Robert to place the crown upon his brow, part of him had already turned away from the capital. The south was a place of deceit and ruin. The north, cold and distant, was his refuge. But even in Winterfell, the whispers reached him. They said that the last Targaryen still lived across the sea. Some wished them dead. Others feared what might come if they were not. In the quiet halls of the Red Keep, Grand Maester Pycelle counseled patience, while Varys the eunuch spun his webs in the shadows. "The realm is safe," he would murmur, "so long as the dragons do not rise again." But his eyes, black and unblinking, always seemed to look eastward, toward the lands where dragons had once flown. Years passed, and the name of Aerys Targaryen faded from the lips of the people. Yet his madness had not vanished. It had merely shifted shape, seeping into memory, into fear, into the hearts of those who ruled in his stead. For the Iron Throne has a way of changing those who sit upon it. It cuts deep, and every drop of blood it draws is a whisper to the next king, promising power, warning of fire. Sometimes, when the moon was high and the torches burned low, the servants swore they could still hear strange sounds beneath the Red Keep, the faint hiss of something alive, waiting. They said the king's wildfire had never been fully found, that the pyromancer's caches still slept beneath the city. Some claimed the old alchemists met in secret to pray over the green flames, seeking to wake the power they once served. Robert laughed when he heard such tales. "Let the past rot," he would say. "The dragons are dead. Let them stay that way." But in taverns and on lonely roads, songs began to rise again, quietly at first, sung by those who remembered the old blood. Songs of the dragon's return. And across the sea, a girl with silver hair stood upon the balcony of a rented house, staring out over the dark waters toward a land she had never seen. The wind tugged at her hair like a whisper from another world. She did not yet know the name of the father who had gone mad, nor the depth of the ruin he had brought. She knew only that the stories called him Dragon, and that dragons were not meant to die forever. She closed her eyes and thought she could almost hear something in the distance, faint and low, like the beat of vast wings. The years slid by like the slow turning of a wheel, grinding down kings and crowns alike. In the halls of the Red Keep, the banners of House Baratheon fluttered where once the three-headed dragon had flown. Yet the stones themselves seemed to remember. When the wind swept down from the bay, it carried a whisper that tasted of smoke and sorrow, as though the very walls grieved for what had been lost, or for what might yet return. King Robert grew heavier with each passing year, his laughter booming through the feasting halls, his rage just as loud when wine or memory soured his mood. He hunted and drank as though war still burned in his blood, but the crown sat uneasily upon his brow. He ruled as a warrior rules, with strength and impulse, not patience or prudence. The realm survived on the will of his council, each man playing his own quiet game beneath the shadow of the Iron Throne. Queen Cersei, golden and cold as a winter sun, learned quickly how to rule without the title. Her beauty turned heads, her cunning turned hearts. She bore the king 3 golden-haired children, each a mirror of her brother Jaime, though few dared speak that thought aloud. To the realm, they were heirs to the Baratheon line. To Cersei, they were her vengeance against a husband who loved only ghosts. Robert, for his part, did not look too closely. He had long ceased to care for politics, finding more comfort in his cups than in counsel. "Let them plot," he would say, waving away the worries of his advisors. "So long as the wine flows and the realm stands, I am content." But the realm did not stand so easily as it seemed. Beneath the peace lay debts, grudges, and the restless memory of fire. Old lords still cursed the Targaryen name, yet others, in secret, spoke it with longing. The dragons had ruled for nearly 300 years. Their absence had left a hollow too deep to fill. And in that hollow, whispers began to grow once more. Across the narrow sea, the exiled Prince Viserys had grown into a man, though not a wise one. The years of begging and wandering had left his pride twisted and brittle, like a sword left too long in salt air. He had spent his youth repeating his father's words, "I am the dragon, and I will have what is mine," until he could no longer tell where the truth ended and madness began. To him, Westeros was not a memory, but an obsession, a dream forever out of reach. With him traveled Daenerys, his last hope and his last weapon. She had grown into a slender girl of quiet grace, her eyes the pale violet of her bloodline, her hair the color of moonlight. She knew her brother's temper, his hunger, his cruelty, and had learned long ago how to move like water around his rage. When he called her my silver queen, she bowed her head and said nothing, though the words tasted like chains. They lived in borrowed houses and dined on borrowed coin, moving from Bravos to Myr to Pentos, always chased by debt and despair. Yet Viserys would speak to her each night of the home they would reclaim, of the banners that would rise once more beneath their sigil. "You are the daughter of the dragon," he would say, touching her silver hair. "And one day we shall return to the land that was stolen from us." Daenerys listened, though she had never seen the land he spoke of. The Westeros of her brother's tales was a dream of fire and glory, not the place her father had left in ashes. In her heart, she felt no hunger for vengeance, only a longing for peace, for a place to belong. But the blood of the dragon is not easily stilled, and in her sleep, she sometimes dreamed of wings and flame. One night, as the moon hung heavy over the waters of Pentos, they were summoned to a feast by a merchant prince named Illyrio Mopatis. His hall was filled with gold and spices, his laughter thick with promise. "The wheel of fate turns," Illyrio told them, his fat fingers heavy with rings. "There are men in the east who remember your house, and there are men in the west who have grown careless. The time for dragons may come again." Viserys' eyes burned with feverish light. "Then give me an army," he demanded. "Give me ships, swords, and gold. I will take back the 7 kingdoms, and the usurper will fall." Illyrio only smiled. "Nothing is freely given, my prince, but there are ways, alliances, marriages, trades, that can make dreams into flesh." And so the seed was planted. Soon after, Daenerys was told of her fate, that she would be wed to Khal Drogo, a warlord of the Dothraki Sea, in exchange for the strength of his riders. Viserys spoke of it as triumph. "When I sit upon the Iron Throne, you shall sit beside me," he said. "You will be my queen, sister." Daenerys said nothing, but in the quiet of her chamber, she pressed her hand to the window and stared out at the dark sea. Somewhere beyond that horizon lay the land of her birth, the land of her father's madness, her mother's death, her brother's dreams. She wondered what kind of place it was that men would burn and kill for it. In the morning, she stood before Drogo for the first time. He was tall as a tower, with skin like copper and hair black as midnight, braided long in the style of his people. He said little, but his gaze was heavy, measuring. Daenerys felt small beneath it, but also strangely calm. The wedding that followed was vast and brutal, filled with laughter and death in equal measure. Viserys smiled through it all, clutching at Illyrio's promises, while Daenerys felt her life slipping away like sand through her fingers. Yet, In the midst of the ceremony, a gift was placed before her, a chest of stone carved with dragons. Inside lay 3 eggs, their shells hard as rock, their colors gleaming faintly in the light. "From the Shadowlands beyond Ashai," Illyrio said, "a bride's gift for the last blood of the dragon." Daenerys touched them and felt warmth beneath her fingers, faint as breath. That night, as she lay beside the man she had been given to, she dreamed again of fire. But this time, the flames did not burn her. They wrapped around her like wings. And far across the sea, in the halls of King's Landing, a shadow stirred beneath the red keep. The faintest shimmer of green, like a memory of wildfire waiting to wake. The wheel that had stopped turning at Aerys's death began to move once more, slow and unstoppable. The world had forgotten the Mad King, but not the blood he left behind. For dragons do not die. They only sleep until the world needs them again. The hot wind of the Dothraki Sea swept endlessly over the plains, whispering through the tall grass like the sea that Daenerys Targaryen had left behind. Here there was no horizon, but the sky, no walls, no cities, only the earth and the riders who ruled it. The Khalasar stretched for miles, tens of thousands of horses thundering across the open land, banners fluttering in their wake. To Daenerys, it felt like being carried by a living storm. She rode among them as Khaleesi now, wife to Khal Drogo, the great stallion of the grass. The first days were hard. She was small and untested, a stranger among a people who worshipped strength. Yet as the moons passed, something in her began to change. The fear that had bound her for years, the fear of her brother's hand, of his temper, of being nothing but his pawn, slowly fell away. The wind, the sun, the rhythm of the ride, they filled her with life. Drogo was a man of few words, but his presence was like fire, fierce, consuming, and steady. He gave her no gentle courtship, yet there was a kind of honor in him, a wild certainty that needed no speech. He called her Moon of my life, and when he said the words, she began to believe them. Viserys did not see the change. He strutted through the Khalasar as if he were a king among beggars, his mouth always filled with threats. He spoke of the Iron Throne, of vengeance and crowns, but the Dothraki only laughed. To them, he was a child who did not know how to ride. "One day, they will give me my army," he said to Daenerys, his eyes bright with madness. "One day, I will take back what is mine." Daenerys looked at him and saw her father's shadow, the same fever in the eyes, the same hunger that devoured everything it touched. She pitied him, but no longer feared him. The days grew hotter. The Khalasar rode east toward Vaes Dothrak, the holy city of their people, where no blood was spilled and no weapon drawn. There, before the Mother of Mountains, Daenerys was to be presented as true Khaleesi. She bore the weight of expectation in silence, feeling something new awakening within her, a strength that was not borrowed or given, but born of her own heart. One night, beneath a moon swollen and red, she dreamed again of fire. In her dream, she stood before a great black dragon, its scales shining like polished steel. Its eyes were her father's, and her brother's both, mad and sorrowful, full of power and ruin. She thought it would devour her, but instead, it bowed its head. When she reached out, the heat did not burn her. It welcomed her. She woke with tears on her cheeks and a strange calm in her chest. In the days that followed, Viserys' desperation grew. He demanded Drogo's promise of ships and soldiers, but the Khal only smiled and said, "When the moon mounts the sun." The words enraged Viserys, who could not see that among the Dothraki, vows were not given lightly. "He mocks me," Viserys spat. "He thinks me his servant, but I am the dragon." That night, drunk and trembling, he burst into the feast of the Khalasar with sword in hand, shouting threats. His hair was tangled, his eyes fever-bright. "You will give me my crown," he screamed. "You will give it to me now, or I will take it myself." Drogo rose slowly, his expression unreadable. The tent fell silent. Then, in a voice calm as stone, he said, "A crown for a king." The Dothraki seized Viserys. Daenerys tried to speak, but her voice caught in her throat. They forced her brother to his knees, and Drogo poured molten gold into a pot until it glowed white with heat. "Crown him," he said. When the metal was poured upon Viserys' head, he did not scream. The gold ran down his face, smoking, and when it cooled, he lay still. "He was no dragon," Daenerys said softly. "Fire cannot kill a dragon." From that day, she carried herself differently. The men of the Khalasar began to bow their heads when she passed. Even the crones of Vaes Dothrak, the Dosh Khaleen, looked upon her with something like respect, and perhaps fear. Time moved on. Daenerys' belly swelled with the child of Drogo, and the Dothraki spoke of him as the stallion who mounts the world, the one who would unite all riders beneath one banner. Drogo swore he would cross the narrow sea for his son, that he would give him the 7 kingdoms as a gift. For the first time, Daenerys thought perhaps her brother's dream was not madness after all. Yet in the heat of that summer, when the winds turned west, another kind of fire was stirring in the halls of King's Landing. Varys whispered to the king of threats unseen, of assassins in the east, of the dragon's blood still breathing. Grand Maester Pycelle muttered that such rumors were madness, but Robert's temper was quick to flare. "I will not wait for the dragons to grow wings again," he snarled. "Kill them, both of them." The order was sent across the sea, a bag of gold for a whisperer's knife, but Illyrio's spies were quicker still. Word reached the Khalasar, and Daenerys trembled for her unborn child. Drogo's wrath was a storm beyond reckoning. "They sought to kill my son," he roared before his riders. "They sought to strike at my blood. I will tear down their stone houses and take their iron chair." The Dothraki cheered, and the fate of kingdoms turned upon that cry. For the first time, the fires of vengeance that had burned in Viserys' heart began to burn in Daenerys' as well. But hers was not a mad fire. It was steady, patient, and deep. As the Khalasar prepared to ride westward, Daenerys stood by the sacred lake of Vaes Dothrak. The moonlight touched the 3 dragon eggs she had carried since her wedding day. She lifted one, black as night and streaked with crimson. It pulsed faintly in her hands, warm and alive. "The dragons are dead," Jorah Mormont, her sworn knight, said softly behind her. Daenerys did not answer. She felt the faint thrum of power beneath her fingers, the echo of something ancient that had slept too long. She thought of her father, of his madness, of his fire that had consumed everything, and for the first time, she felt no fear of it. "The dragons are not dead," she whispered. "They are only sleeping." The wind rose, and for a heartbeat, it seemed to carry the faintest sound of wings. Far away, beyond the sea, the Iron Throne sat cold beneath its crown of blades, and in its shadow, men still dreamed of power. But across the world, in the hands of a silver-haired girl beneath a foreign moon, the blood of the dragon began to stir once more. The long grass swayed like a sea of gold beneath the burning sky, and the Dothraki rode at its heart a river of dust and thunder. Their laughter and war cries carried on the wind, but Daenerys Targaryen heard only the sound of her own breath and the beating of her heart. The days of fear were gone. She was Khaleesi now, wife to Khal Drogo, mother to the child who would be king of the world. Yet peace in such a life was never meant to last. The gods, it seemed, were not done with her. When the sun rode high and merciless, the Khalasar crossed the great plains toward the western lands, where merchants waited with slaves and silver. Drogo, proud and restless, sought to trade, to arm his riders with steel before they began their war across the sea. The Khalasar stretched for miles, and Daenerys rode among them, her belly heavy with the son she would soon bear. She named him Rhaego in her heart, after the brother she had lost and the prince her father had broken. But the shadows were lengthening behind her. The order to kill the Targaryen exiles had been carried across the narrow sea, whispered through ports and taverns. There are few things in the world faster than a king's fear, and fewer still more deadly. The first assassin came as a peddler in Vaes Dothrak, smiling beneath a heavy beard. He brought a gift, a cask of sweet wine. Jorah Mormont, the knight who had bound his fate to hers, saw the lie in the man's eyes before the poison could pass her lips. The assassin died beneath Dothraki's spears, and the wine spilled across the earth like dark blood. When Drogo learned what had been intended, his rage was a storm. He rose before his riders, his braid gleaming with gold rings, his voice thunder rolling across the plain. "They sought to kill my son," he roared. "They sent their knives across the sea to strike at my blood. I will take their iron chair and make it my throne. I will kill their men and enslave their women. I will tear down their stone houses and melt their cities to sand." The Dothraki screamed in answer, beating their spears against their chests until the earth itself seemed to tremble. The war that Viserys had dreamed of would now come to pass, but it would not be his war. It would be Daenerys's. That night, as Drogo swore his vengeance beside the sacred fire, Daenerys stood apart, her hand resting upon her swollen belly. She watched the flames twist and reach toward the sky, their shapes dancing like dragons. In their light, she thought she saw her father's face, mad, burning, triumphant, and she whispered to him, "Not as you did, father, not with madness, with strength. But the gods are cruel, and fate sharper than any sword." The next day, as the Khalasar rode west, Drogo fell upon his horse. The wound he had taken from a rival in a petty skirmish, one barely worth notice, had festered in the heat. Blood and pus soaked the leather across his chest. He tried to rise, but his great body shook, and for the first time, Daenerys saw fear in the eyes of men who had never known it. The healers of the Khalasar worked their arts, but Drogo grew weaker with each dawn. Daenerys would not accept it. "There must be another way," she said, her voice steady though her heart quaked. "He is the call. His spirit cannot die." An old woman was brought before her, Mirri Maz Duur, a god's wife taken as slave from one of the villages the Khalasar had burned. Her eyes were black and knowing, her voice like smoke. "There are ways," she said softly, "but life must pay for life." Jorah urged caution, but Daenerys' love was stronger than reason. "Do what you must," she told the god's wife. "Save him." As the sun fell, Mirri's tent filled with the scent of herbs and death. The riders gathered outside, uneasy, as the woman's chants rose and the air turned thick with unseen power. Daenerys entered only once, and what she saw made her blood run cold. Shadows moving within the flame, a darkness that seemed to breathe. She fled before it swallowed her. When the sun rose again, Drogo still lived, but he was not the man he had been. His eyes were dull and empty, his breath shallow. He did not speak. He did not know her. Daenerys fell to her knees. "You said you would save him," she whispered. Mirri Maz-Dur smiled a smile without warmth. "He lives. That was your wish. You asked for life, Khaleesi, not for the return of the man he was." Then Daenerys understood the price, and before the night ended, her own pain came upon her. The child she bore, the stallion who would mount the world, came stillborn. The midwives fled from the tent, screaming. They said the babe had been twisted and scaled like a dragon, with leathern wings and the mark of death upon him. Daenerys lay in the ashes of her hope, her world undone. The riders turned against her, saying she had brought witchcraft and curse upon them. Jorah carried her away, his arms trembling beneath her weight. By the time the moon rose, she had lost everything. Drogo's great body sat unmoving beneath the stars, his braid uncut, his eyes blank. The Khalasar scattered to the wind, each seeking his own glory. Daenerys stayed beside him, washing his face with her tears. When the end came, it was she who gave it. She pressed a pillow to his chest and whispered, "When the sun rises in the west and sets in the east, when the rivers run dry and the mountains blow in the wind like leaves, you will return to me, my sun and stars." Then she closed his eyes and kissed him one last time. The next day, Daenerys ordered the pyre to be built. They piled it high with wood and oil, with Drogo's treasures and horse, with the body of Mirri Maz-Dur bound and defiant. The dragon eggs were placed at the center, gleaming like jewels in the firelight. As the stars wheeled overhead, Daenerys stood before the pyre. The wind rose, hot and wild. "You will not wake the dragon," Mirri hissed. "I am the dragon," Daenerys replied, and she stepped into the flames. The fire roared like the breath of the gods. The watchers cried out, but none dared go near. The pyre burned through the night, a pillar of light beneath the dark. When dawn came, the ashes still smoked. The men approached, thinking to find her bones. But Daenerys Targaryen stood alive amid the ruin, naked and unburned. 3 small shapes clung to her, one black, one green, one gold. They opened their mouths and screamed, a sound that split the sky. The dragons had returned. And in that moment, across the sea and across the years, the world changed once more. The dawn that broke over the red plains of the Dothraki Sea was like no other in living memory. The air still trembled with the echo of dragons' cries, and the sky above the pyre shimmered with strange light, as if the very heavens bore witness to a birth both ancient and new. Where fire had devoured wood and flesh alike, only ash remained, ash, and a young woman standing unburned within it. Daenerys Targaryen, last of her line, daughter of the Mad King, rose from the embers crowned in flame. Her skin bore no scar, her hair was burned away, yet her eyes blazed with a light fiercer than any fire. Curled against her body were 3 living creatures, their scales glimmering like molten jewels. They were small, no larger than cats, but their wings stretched wide as they hissed and tasted the morning air with forked tongues. The black one clung to her shoulder and watched the world with molten eyes. The green rested against her arm, its claws like polished glass. The gold nestled at her breast, breathing softly. Her people, the remnants of the Khalasar, the lost and the broken, fell to their knees. None dared speak. In the east, they said dragons were gone from the world, that their fire had died with the last of the Targaryens. Yet here they were, reborn from the ashes of death. Jorah Mormont, who had followed her through fire and grief, took a single step forward and fell to one knee. "Blood of my blood," he whispered. "My queen." Daenerys looked down upon him, her voice calm, almost distant. "They will come again, sir. The world will hear the sound of dragons once more." The wind rose, scattering the ashes of the pyre across the land like a benediction. The fire had taken everything: her husband, her child, her fear. In their place, it had left only purpose. She was no longer the frightened girl who had crossed the sea under her brother's shadow. She was the blood of the dragon, and the world would remember her name. The days that followed were hard. The Khalasar had broken apart after Drogo's fall, but word of the miracle spread faster than hoofbeats. Riders who had abandoned her returned, drawn by fear or wonder. They called her Mother of Dragons, and where once they had seen a slave's widow, they now saw a sign from the gods. Under her command, they gathered what little remained of Drogo's people: old men, women, children, and the few warriors who still bore her loyalty. It was a meager following, but it was a beginning. The dragons grew swiftly. They were wild and hungry, their cries haunting the night. Daenerys fed them with her own hands, speaking to them in the tongue of Valyria, the language of her blood. When they looked into her eyes, she saw not beasts, but kin. They were the last children of fire, as she was. Jorah warned her that the world would come for her now. "Word will spread," he said. "Every king across the sea will fear what you've birthed. They will send knives and gold alike to see your end." Daenerys smiled faintly. "Let them come. I am not my father. I will not burn the world for fear of losing it." Still, she knew that her father's shadow walked beside her. The memory of Aerys Targaryen, his madness, his ruin, was a ghost she could not banish. But where he had seen only destruction, she would bring renewal. "Fire and blood," she whispered to herself at night, staring into the dark. But not fire alone. They journeyed eastward through the desert, toward the cities of the Free Bay. The land was cruel, sun-baked and barren, but Daenerys drove her people forward with a will that astonished even her closest followers. At times, she felt the fire within her falter, but the dragon's cries always rekindled it. They were small still, but when they spread their wings against the dying light, she felt the breath of destiny upon her cheek. In Korth, the fabled city of traitors and liars, they found their first refuge. Its towers rose high and pale as bone, its gates carved with wonders. The 13, the merchants who ruled there, received her with smiles and greed thinly veiled. "You are the last of your kind," they told her, "but dragons bring both wealth and woe. Choose your allies with care." Daenerys bowed her head, but she trusted none of them. Korth was a city of masks, and behind every smile she saw hunger, the same hunger that had destroyed her father's court long ago. Still, she played their game, learning what she could, listening more than she spoke. Her dragons grew stronger in the warmth of Korth's sun, and their wings began to stretch wide. The people came to see them, bringing gifts and petitions, hoping to bask in her glory. Some knelt in awe, others plotted in whispers. One night, Daenerys stood upon her balcony overlooking the sea. The dragons rested at her feet, their eyes glowing in the dark. She thought of the Iron Throne, of the blades that cut her father's hands, of the blood spilled to win it, of the madness it bred in those who sought to claim it. Was it worth reclaiming? The question haunted her more than she wished to admit. Yet in her heart, she knew the truth. The throne was not the goal. It was the means. The world her father had destroyed she would rebuild, not through fear, but through fire's cleansing truth. "Fire does not only burn," she murmured to the night. "It forges." Below her, the dragon stirred, their small hearts beating in rhythm with her own. Far away, across the sea, in the castle her family had lost, another storm brewed. King Robert's reign waned, his strength fading into wine and regret. His small council whispered in corners, and his queen's golden children grew restless beneath their mother's watchful eye. The realm he had forged with blood was beginning to crack. The wheel was turning again. Daenerys looked east, then west, and saw in both directions a world waiting to burn or to be remade. She raised her hand, and the black dragon climbed to her shoulder. "Come, my children," she said softly. "The world has slept long enough." The beast spread its wings, and with a cry that echoed across the city's marble walls, it leapt into the air. The others followed, gold and green, their wings cutting through the dawn. The people of Korth fell silent as they saw them rise, a sight unseen since the doom of Valyria. In that moment, the promise of the Targaryens was reborn, not in madness or tyranny, but in flame and flight. And somewhere, in the dark heart of Westeros, where the Iron Throne still waited beneath its crown of blades, a cold wind passed through the hall. The torches flickered, and the shadows danced like firelight upon the steel. For the dragons had awakened, and with them, the world would never be the same again. The heat of Korth was heavy as a hand upon the throat, but Daenerys Targaryen endured it as she endured all things. Within the palace, lent to her by the merchant prince Zaro Daxos, her dragons grew strong and restless. They hunted shadows across the marble floors, their wings whispering against silk curtains. Each day they grew bolder. The black Drogon already tested his fire upon the meat she gave him, and when his small flames licked across the air, men turned their faces away in awe. "Soon," she told them as she fed them from her own hand, "we will cross the world. We will take back what was stolen." But the dragons were wild things. They did not know the meaning of thrones or kingdoms. Their only loyalty was to fire and to her. Her followers were few, yet bound to her with unshaken faith. Ser Jorah Mormont, grizzled and scarred, served her with the quiet devotion of one who has found purpose in another's light. The Khalasar that remained numbered less than 100 souls, women and children, the weak and the weary, but to them, she was mother. They followed her through hunger and sand, through betrayal and loss. And Daenerys, who had once been a frightened girl sold for a crown, now moved among them with the bearing of a queen. Yet Korth was a serpent's nest, its courtyards full of beauty and danger alike. The 13 who ruled it offered her smiles sharper than knives. "A dragon queen without ships or soldiers is but a dream," said the pureborn of the city, their robes white as salt. "A dream cannot conquer a kingdom." Daenerys bowed her head, but her heart burned. "Dreams made this world once," she told Ser Jorah after they left the hall, "and dreams will make it anew." Still, she could see their truth. Without ships, she could not cross the sea. Without an army, she could not reclaim her birthright. The Iron Throne might as well have been on the moon. As weeks passed, she sought allies among Korth's merchants and warlocks. Zaro Daxos professed himself her friend, filling her ears with soft promises. "Marry me, Daenerys Stormborn," he said one night, as they walked among gardens of pale flowers that bloomed only in darkness. "Share my house, and all my wealth shall be yours. I will give you ships, gold, and guards enough to shake the world." But Daenerys had learned to see beyond gilded words. She saw the hunger in his eyes, the lust not for her body, but for the dragons she carried. "You are kind," she said, her voice cool as glass. but I am already wed, to fire and to destiny." Zaro laughed, though there was no mirth in the sound. "Dreams do not fill the belly, my queen. Beware that your fire does not burn you as it burned your father." At the mention of Eris, her heart clenched. The memory of her father's madness still haunted her. The screams, the wildfire, the ruin of her house. In every whisper of flame, she heard the echo of his laughter. Yet she would not be him. She had promised herself that. The warlocks of Korth were different. They came to her in silence, pale as ghosts, their lips stained blue from the drink they called Shade of the Evening. They spoke of power and prophecy, of visions beyond mortal sight. "Come to the house of the undying," they urged. "There you will see what was, what is, and what shall be." Against Ser Jorah's counsel, Daenerys went. She entered the tower of the warlocks with her dragons upon her shoulders, her heart steady despite the dread that clung to her. The air within was strange, thick with whispers, the walls shifting like mist. She walked through halls that folded upon themselves, where every shadow seemed alive. Visions came to her in flickering firelight. She saw her brother Rhaegar standing beside a woman with a babe in her arms. "There must be one more," he said softly. "The dragon has 3 heads." His eyes met hers, and though she had never known him, tears filled her eyes. She saw a city with a great wall of ice, taller than mountains, and beyond it, a darkness that moved like a living storm. She saw a red comet blazing across the sky, and dragons flying over fields of ash. And last of all, she saw the Iron Throne again, empty, shrouded in snow and shadow. When she emerged, her dragon shrieking around her, the house of the undying burned. Whether the flames came from her command or from the fury of the beasts, she never knew. The warlocks perished, and Daenerys stood beneath the moon, trembling but unbroken. "Their magic was hunger," she told Jorah afterward. "It feeds upon the fear of others, but mine is life." He looked upon her then not as a girl, but as something born of myth. "Your father would have destroyed the world for his pride," he said. "You must be stronger than him." "I will be," Daenerys replied. "I am not the Mad King's daughter. I am Daenerys Stormborn, and I will bring fire not of madness, but of renewal." In the months that followed, her resolve hardened. Korth's courtiers turned cold when they saw they could not own her. The gates that had opened wide were now barred against her. She gathered her small band and made ready to depart, her eyes set eastward, toward the lands of slaves and sorrow where her destiny waited. As her ship set sail from the harbor, the people of Korth watched from their marble walls. Some laughed, calling her a fool. Others crossed themselves in fear. But Daenerys did not look back. The sea wind filled her hair, and the dragons cried above her, their wings catching the dawn. She thought of the prophecy whispered in the house of the undying, of ice and fire, of 3 heads of the dragon, of the throne covered in snow. None of it made sense to her, not yet. But the pull of fate was strong. Somewhere across the world, forces were gathering, as if the very earth knew that the old balance was breaking. "Fire is waking," she murmured to the waves, "and soon the world will remember the name Targaryen." Behind her, the city of Korth dwindled to a shimmer on the horizon. Ahead, the endless ocean glimmered with light. Her dragons soared higher, black, green, and gold, their cries ringing like bells of destiny. They were the first of their kind in generations, the children of a new age, heralds of fire and change. And Daenerys Stormborn, the last scion of the house that had burned itself to ruin, stood at the prow of her ship and smiled into the wind. for she no longer feared fire. She had become it. The ships that bore Daenerys Targaryen eastward were small and weather-worn, their sails patched and their crews sullen, but to her they were vessels of destiny. Behind her lay Korth, a city of marble and deceit. Before her stretched the Jade Sea, endless and green beneath the burning sky. The dragons flew above her mast, their cries sharp as trumpets. When they wheeled against the sun, men shaded their eyes and crossed themselves in fear, for no living soul had seen their like in centuries. Days turned into weeks. The sea was cruel and changeable. One day it lay still as glass, the next it clawed and roared like some ancient beast. The men prayed to their gods, but Daenerys prayed to none. "The gods made my father mad," she told Jorah once. "I will trust only in fire." They came at last to Astapor, a city of red brick and darker hearts. The air smelled of spice and blood, and everywhere the crack of whips echoed through the streets. Slaves filled the markets, men and women branded, children hollow-eyed. The walls were lined with heads, reminders of what happened to those who defied their masters. Ser Jorah warned her to pass by. "This is no place for mercy," he said. "Only cruelty and trade." But Daenerys did not turn away. "If I am to rule, I must see what the world truly is." Within the Plaza of Pride, she met the masters of Astapor, the good masters they called themselves, though their hearts were as black as pitch. They showed her the Unsullied, an army of slaves bred and broken from birth, trained to kill without thought or fear. 10,000 stood upon the sands, their spears glinting like a field of stars. "For these soldiers, we ask only fair payment," said Krasnus Mo Naklos, the fattest of the slavers. He spoke through a translator, for though he spat venom with every word, he thought her too simple to understand his tongue. Daenerys listened in silence as he called her names: little girl, silver witch, foolish child. She smiled and nodded, and when he insulted her dragons, she smiled still. "How many for all?" she asked. The slaver blinked. "All? No man has ever bought them all. I am not a man," she said softly. They haggled for days beneath the red sun. At last, the bargain was struck. All the Unsullied in exchange for one of her dragons. Her followers were horrified, but she silenced them with a glance. When the hour came, the Plaza of Pride filled with heat and noise. The good masters stood upon their high steps, preening, while Daenerys approached with the black dragon, Drogon, chained at her side. The slaver grinned as he took the whip that marked command over the soldiers. "It is done," he said through his interpreter. "You may leave with your beasts, little queen." Daenerys held his gaze. "A dragon is no beast," she said in perfect Valyrian. The man froze, the color draining from his face, as he realized she had understood every vile word he'd spoken. "You," he began. "Drogon," she said softly. The black dragon opened its jaws, and fire filled the plaza. The air itself screamed. Krasnus died before he could run, his silks turning to ash in an instant. The other masters followed, their cries lost in the roar of flame. Daenerys turned to the Unsullied, her voice rising above the chaos. "Slaves you were," she cried, "but now you are free. Will you fight for me as free men?" The army stood still as stone. Then, as one, they struck their spears upon the ground. The sound rolled across the city like thunder. "Misa!" the freed slaves shouted in tongues Daenerys did not yet know. "Mother." When the smoke cleared, the flags of Astapor burned upon their towers, and the red bricks ran dark with the blood of slavers. Daenerys rode through the streets with her dragons circling above, and the people knelt before her. "See, Jorah," she said softly. Fire can destroy, but it can also cleanse. He bowed his head. So it can, Your Grace, but fire does not choose whom it burns. Her army marched north toward Yunkai, another city of chains. Word of the Dragon Queen spread before her. The masters of Yunkai offered gold and peace if she would pass them by. She refused. No city shall stand upon the backs of slaves while I draw breath. Her Unsullied struck swift and sure, their ranks moving with perfect unity. The walls of Yunkai fell, its gates thrown open by those who had once been bound. When Daenerys entered, thousands gathered around her. They called her mother again, reaching out to touch her hands, her cloak, even the hem of her gown. She looked upon their faces, hopeful, desperate, and something within her heart shifted. These were not her subjects by blood or birth, yet they were hers all the same. She had freed them. She had given them more than life. She had given them hope. And in their eyes, she saw her purpose take form, not merely to reclaim a throne of blades, but to break the chains of a world built on cruelty. Still, doubts haunted her when night fell. She dreamed of the Iron Throne, of her father's laughter echoing through burning halls. He thought he was cleansing, she whispered to Jorah one night as the campfires burned low. He thought his fire was just. Your father was mad, said Jorah. You are not. But he was my blood, she murmured. Madness runs deep in dragons. Jorah knelt before her, his face solemn. Then be the first to tame it. In Meereen, the last and greatest of the slaver cities, her army met its fiercest trial. The masters crucified slave children along the road to their gates, a line of agony stretching for miles. Each one bore a sign. This is what comes of defiance. Daenerys's fury was a quiet thing, cold as the heart of flame. For every child they have killed, she said, a master will hang upon a cross. When Meereen fell, her banners rose over its pyramids, and her justice was done. The chains were broken, the whips cast down. The freed men sang her name through the streets, yet peace brought no rest. Ruling was a heavier crown than conquest. Her advisors quarreled, her new subjects hungered, and her enemies gathered like vultures beyond the walls. Each choice she made seemed to birth 10 more. Some nights she stood upon the high balcony of her palace, watching the dragons soar through the smoke-red sky. Their cries echoed over the bay, fierce and untamed. Below, the city she had claimed stirred and simmered like a cauldron. Am I my father's daughter? She whispered to the wind. Or something new? No answer came but the beating of wings. Still, in her heart, the fire burned bright. She would not be her father's ruin, nor her brother's folly. She would be the dragon that remade the world. The city of Meereen rose from the red dust like a jewel carved of blood and flame, but to Daenerys Targaryen, it was a prison gilded with gold. The walls stood high, their bricks painted with scenes of conquest and glory, yet beneath them, the streets seethed with unrest. The masters were broken, the slaves freed, and still the air stank of fear. She had come as a conqueror, but now she ruled as a queen, and ruling, she learned, was the cruelest war of all. Each morning brought petitions to her throne, a seat of carved wood set beneath the great dome of the pyramid. Freedmen begged for justice, masters pleaded for mercy, and the hungry cried out for bread. Her decrees rippled through the city like fire through dry grass. For every wrong she righted, 3 more sprang up in its place. The people called her Misa, mother, but even love can turn to wrath when bellies ache and coins run thin. Her council urged her to leave the city and march west. You have your army, your grace, Ser Jorah told her. You have your dragons. The Iron Throne waits. Let these people rule themselves. But Daenerys shook her head. "If I cannot rule one city without chains or fear, how can I rule 7 kingdoms? I will not leave Meereen to rot behind me." So she stayed, and the days bled into one another beneath the merciless sun. The dragons grew vast and wild, their wings darkening the sky. They hunted beyond the walls, taking goats, horses, even men. Drogon, the Black, grew fiercest of all. When he struck, his fire turned night to day. The people whispered that he was her father reborn, and in their fear, they began to curse the name of their queen. She ordered chains forged for the lesser two, Viserion and Rhaegal, locking them beneath the pyramid where their roars shook the stone. But Drogon could not be bound. He vanished into the deserts, leaving only fire in his wake. That night, Daenerys wept as she listened to the cries of the chained beasts echo through the halls. "Forgive me," she whispered. "You are my children, but I am their queen." No answer came but the sound of claws against stone. Her heart grew heavy with doubt. The burdens of rule pressed upon her like iron. The sons of the Harpy, a secret brotherhood of the old masters, rose in rebellion, striking from the shadows. Freedmen and former slaves turned against one another, and the streets ran with blood. "You cannot make peace with those who remember power," said Daario Naharis, her captain, a sellsword with eyes like molten gold and a smile sharp as steel. "Cut off their heads, my queen, and give the rest to the dragons." But Daenerys had seen too much death. "If I rule by fear alone, I am my father's daughter," she said. Still, each day the Harpies struck again. Their knives found her soldiers in alleys, her servants in the market, her counselors in their beds. Her people called for vengeance, and Daenerys felt the fire rise in her blood. One dawn, she rode through the streets of Meereen on a white mare, her guards close behind. The people watched from doorways and rooftops, some with reverence, others with hate. At the plaza where slaves had once been sold, she halted and spoke. "You cry for peace," she said, her voice carrying through the still air. "Then lay down your knives. The past is ashes. Build anew, and I will stand with you." No voice answered. Only the wind moved through the square. That night, they found another of her unsullied slain, a harpy's mask nailed above his corpse. Daenerys closed her eyes and felt the heat of rage beneath her skin. For the first time, she understood the madness her father had known, the whisper that promised an end to all rebellion through flame. But where Aerys had been ruled by his fire, she would rule hers. "Bring the guilty to me," she told her guards, "and bring the dragons." When morning came, she held her court before the pyramid. The Harpies' sons were dragged forth, their masks torn away. Some were guilty, some perhaps not, but the city watched in silence as she pronounced judgment. The dragon's fire cleansed the square. It was over in moments, but the screams lingered long after. Afterward, she walked alone upon the terrace, her face turned toward the sea. Daario found her there, silent, the wind playing in her silver hair. "Mercy and justice rarely walk the same road, my queen," he said softly. "I know," she answered, "but if I lose one, I lose myself." Beyond Meereen, the storm gathered again. The slave cities she had freed turned against her. Yunkai and Astapor rose anew under banners of vengeance. Their armies marched toward her walls, their ships blockading her harbor. Disease stalked the streets, and famine followed. Her council begged her to flee, but Daenerys would not. "I will not run from the world I mean to change," she said. "If I am to be queen, I must face what queens are born to face." When the battle came, it came swift and merciless. The sky filled with smoke and screaming gulls. The drums of war thundered beyond the gates. The Unsullied held the walls, but the tide of enemies was endless. Then, in the midst of chaos, the cry came. Drogon had returned. He burst from the clouds like a shadow of the old world, black wings spreading wide, fire pouring from his jaws. The enemy lines broke beneath his wrath, their ranks scattering in terror. Meereen's defenders fell to their knees, crying her name. Daenerys herself ran to the field, her heart pounding. When Drogon landed before her, his eyes met hers, wild, proud, terrible. She stepped forward without fear. "I am no slave to destiny," she said, "but neither will I flee it." She climbed upon his back. The beast shuddered once, then leapt skyward, the wind tearing at her hair. Below her, the world fell away. The city, the war, the chains. The sky swallowed her whole, and for the first time since the pyre, she felt truly free. They flew far beyond Meereen, past the smoking battlefields and the shining rivers, out into the endless red waste. Days blurred into nights. Hunger and thirst gnawed at her, but the fire within sustained her. When at last Drogon set her down upon a lonely plain, she slept beside him, dreaming of dragons yet unborn and kingdoms yet to fall. When she woke, riders surrounded her, hard men in leather and bronze, faces she knew. Another Khalasar had found her, their banners snapping in the wind. Daenerys rose, her dragon at her back. The Dothraki stared, half in awe, half in fear. The leader dismounted and approached, a scarred giant with eyes like dark stone. He looked at the woman who had tamed fire itself and smiled grimly. "You are no slave," he said. "You are Khaleesi." Daenerys stood tall, the sun blazing upon her hair, the dragon's shadow stretching long across the sand. "No," she said, "I am queen." And as Drogon roared to the heavens, the grasslands trembled beneath her feet. The fire of the Targaryens had returned to the world, and its flame would not be quenched again. The wind that swept across the Dothraki Sea smelled of dust and promise. The grass bent like waves before the flight of the dragon, its shadow gliding vast across the land. The riders followed that shadow, shouting to one another, raising their curved blades high, their eyes bright with fear and wonder. No Khal had ever ridden such a beast. No woman had ever commanded such power. Yet there she stood, small and bright beneath the sun, her hair silver as frost, her eyes like twin amethysts burning in the heat. Daenerys Targaryen, last of her house, looked upon the gathered Khalasars and felt the old name of her blood stir once more. The air shimmered around her with the dragon's heat, and every breath she drew was smoke and memory. She had crossed deserts and seas, freed slaves and burned tyrants. She had walked through fire and emerged reborn. Now the plains themselves bowed before her. The Dothraki circled, their horses stamping, their eyes wide. Khal Moro, great and scarred, laughed when he saw her. A woman in the wild with a monster for a steed. You should have stayed in your city of stone. Daenerys lifted her head. I was born of kings. The dragon is my birthright. Moro's smile faded. You will come with me to Vice Dothrak. The widows of Khals will judge your fate. I am no widow, she said. I am the blood of the dragon. When he reached to seize her, Drogon's roar split the sky. The horses screamed and scattered. Moro stumbled back, his courage melting as the dragon's shadow fell over him. Flames licked the air, and Daenerys raised her hand. Fire is mine, she said. Bend the knee, or burn. The Khal stared at her, sweat running down his face. Then he dropped to his knees, and one by one, his riders followed. 10,000 men bowed before the queen with the dragon at her back. In that moment, the song of her house rose again upon the wind. The years that followed were years of forging. The Dothraki became her army, the Unsullied her shield. The freedmen of Meereen, Yunkai, and Astapor filled her ranks. Ships were built, sails stretched wide to catch the western wind, and always the dragons grew. Drogon black as shadow, Viserion pale as sunlight, Rhaegal green as deep water. When they flew together, the very earth trembled. But power is never peace. Each city she left behind whispered her name as a prayer and a curse. Traitors spoke of a queen who burned kings, who broke chains and thrones alike. In Westeros, the lords remembered her father's madness and shuddered. To some, she was salvation. To others, the shadow of doom reborn. On the day her fleet was ready, Daenerys stood upon the prow of her flagship and watched the horizon fade into mist. Her banners, black and red, the dragon triumphant, snapped in the wind. Around her, the sea was alive with ships, sails full and bright. "Your Grace," said Tyrion Lannister, who had come to her council at last, "the winds are with us. Westeros lies ahead." Daenerys looked west, toward the land of her birth. "Then we sail for home." The journey took long months. Storms tore at their sails. Men whispered of omens and ghosts. But Daenerys was unshaken. The dragons flew above them, warding off tempests and fear alike. When at last they sighted the green cliffs of Dragonstone rising from the mist, her heart tightened. She had been born here in the midst of storm and death. Now she returned as conqueror. The castle stood bleak and proud upon its black rock, its towers shaped like dragons' spines. The halls smelled of salt and ash, of memories long buried. As she walked the old paths, the sound of her footsteps echoed through chambers once trod by her father and brother. Before the great hearth, she paused. "Father," she whispered, "you sought to rule through fear and fire. I will rule through fire and justice." The flames leapt higher, as if answering her vow. Outside, the sea beat against the cliffs. Ravens carried word across the realm. The Dragon Queen had come. In King's Landing, the Iron Throne sat cold beneath its crown of blades. Cersei Lannister wore the crown now, her rule built on ash and poison. When she heard the tidings, she smiled, though her eyes were hard as glass. "Let her come," she said. "We shall see if her fire burns hotter than mine." Far in the north, beyond rivers and mountains, Jon Snow stood upon the battlements of Winterfell and gazed toward the south. The wind that touched his face carried the faintest scent of salt and smoke, and though he could not know it, the wheel of fate had begun to turn. For ice and fire were moving toward each other, drawn by a bond older than kings. On Dragonstone's highest tower, Daenerys looked out across the sea she had conquered. Drogon perched beside her, his eyes glowing like embers. She reached out, resting her hand against the warm scales of his neck. "We have come far," she murmured, "but the true war lies ahead." The dragon rumbled low, as if he understood. In that quiet, she thought of the long road that had led her here. The ashes of her father's madness, her brother's greed, the fire that had both cursed and blessed her blood. She thought of the slaves she had freed, the men she had burned, the cities she had broken. Her heart was heavy with memory, but the flame within her burned steady still. "The world will remember," she said softly, "not the mad king, not the beggar prince, but the queen who walked through fire and was not consumed." The wind rose, carrying her words into the dark. Below, her armies gathered, their torches bright upon the shore. Above, her dragons turned their wings toward the west. The dawn broke then, pale and cold upon the sea. It gleamed upon her banners, upon her eyes, upon the blade of destiny itself. And thus, the story of the Mad King's line came full circle. From madness to ashes, from ashes to flame reborn. The world that had thought the dragons gone forever would soon learn otherwise. For Daenerys, Stormborn of House Targaryen, rightful heir to the Iron Throne, had come to claim her father's realm, not with madness, but with fire. And the sound of her dragon's cries carried on the wind heralded the beginning of a new age, the age of fire and blood once more.